Good morning. I will now convene this regular meeting, the final Tuesday of 2024. It is December 17th. Welcome to everyone here in Harris Hall and those of you joining us online. For those of you who came to give public comment, I'll just ask for your patience. We have a couple of items of business that we need to address before public comment. And before that, I'll make sure there are no other adjustments to the agenda this morning, none from the administrator or the board. And so with that, we will move directly into a public hearing. This is on Order and Resolution 24-12-1701 in the matter of adopting fiscal year 24-25 Supplemental Budget 2. And we will start with a summary from staff, and I'll welcome Kevin Mahoney to the table this morning. Good morning.
Good morning,
Is there anything the administrator wants to say prior to this item?
Kevin.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, and Christine is online with us here also.
Good morning, Christine.
Good morning, Chair Traeger and Commissioners. This is the second supplemental budget for fiscal year 24-25. The 24-25 budget was originally adopted by the board in June of 2024. This is the second opportunity for departments to adjust budgets to account for known changes in revenue and expenditures. So we'll see those. Most notably, as far as changes, you'll see across the board in Supplemental 2, all funds are updated to adjust to the actual fund balances that rolled forward from last year. In several funds, you'll also see adjustments to salary and benefits related to increases from the recently approved AFSCME General and Nurses Collective Bargaining Agreements. And FTE changes include moving 0.5 FTE in the Sheriff's Office from the General Fund to Special Revenue Fund. That's related to a contract increase for Sergeant Patrol for the City of Veneta. In Health and Human Services, a new 1.0 FTE was added in Clinical Financial Services, one was deleted in Developmental Disabilities, and one was adjusted from 1.0 down to 0.8 FTE in Public Health. And that concludes the staff summary.
Great, thank you for that, Kevin. This is a public hearing on the supplemental budget for the current fiscal year as allowed under ORS 294.471 and ORS 294.473. This public hearing is a requirement under ORS 294.473 due to one or more funds amending expenditures by more than 10% from current budgeted amounts. Notice of this hearing and summary of the changes was published as detailed in the supplemental budget order and resolution included in this agenda item. We do have an opportunity for testimony for or against any item in the supplemental. Jessica, there's no one signed up in Harris Hall to provide testimony, so I will open the public hearing to check and see if there's anyone wishing to give comments specifically to the budget supplemental online this morning.
Commissioners, we have no members of the public joining us this morning.
Thank you. Then close the public hearing and see if there's any additional comment from staff.
No additional, thank you.
Christine, anything from you this morning? Okay.
Nothing. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Then I will open it up to any questions of staff from the board or would entertain a motion.
Chair, I have a motion.
Thank you.
I move approval of Order Resolution 24-12-1701, adopting the fiscal year 24-25 supplemental budget number 2, making, reducing, and transferring appropriations as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It has been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much to the Budget Office for all of your work and your time this morning.
Thank you.
With that, we will move through the agenda to check to see if there's any emergency business this morning. None. And one more item before we get to public comment, which is our employee recognition, where we like to take a few minutes to really elevate and give the board an opportunity to hear a little bit more about some of the exceptional work happening here at Lane County. So I'll turn it over to the administrator to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. It's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to indulge in recognizing some of our great employees and the work that they're doing. So I want to invite Mr. Ed Alverson, our Natural Areas Coordinator, and Brett Henry, our Parks Manager, up here. I'll share with you first that Ed began his career in the area as a contractor working with Lane County in the 80s, and then actually started as an employee. It was working with the Rivers to Ridges Partnership in 1991, and then began with our Parks Department just a little less than 10 years ago. So a long time, decades of doing work in our community, and we're so pleased to recognize Ed, who was recognized by the Oregon Recreation and Parks Association recently for his outstanding contribution to the Natural Areas field during the annual conference. And while Ed does a variety of work to safeguard and enhance natural areas across our parks, the award specifically acknowledges Ed's ongoing dedication to restoring oak savanna and prairie habitats in the Willamette Valley. As the board, I think, all knows, Howard Buford Recreation Area in particular is an example of that work. And there are more than 1,000 acres of prairie, savanna, and oak woodland that are found in the Howard Buford Recreation Area. It's a high concentration of a declining resource, if you will, with only about 2% of the Willamette Valley's original prairie and savanna and 10% of floodplain forest habitat remaining. Howard Buford Recreation Area is home to some of the largest remnants of these habitat types in public ownership. Ed has been a leader in the use of ecological fire to restore habitat and benefit fire-dependent native plant and animal species. Using fire to manage the land also reduced understory fuels that can make wildfires worse and mirror how indigenous people manage land in the valley for thousands of years. Ed's dedication, and we're recognizing Ed today in particular for our core behavior of Driven to Connect, because you can't do this work without the partners in the community that we rely so heavily on. And Ed's dedication, coupled with the partners that he works with, has developed with agencies like Friends of Howard Buford Recreation Area and Mount Pisgah Arboretum and Rivers to Ridges. And these are the partnerships that are making a lasting impact on our community and preserving these natural resources for future generations. So it's our pleasure to recognize Ed Alverson and ask Brett, our Parks Manager, if you want to add any comments.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so I started in 2018, so I've been Parks Manager for about 6 years, and it's just been a pleasure to really learn a lot from Ed. I know more about my parks now, especially the ecology. Ed is one of the top botanists in the state. He's well recognized, has published books. We're just extremely proud to have him on staff.
Brett, thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
We don't always put you on the spot, but if you'd like to say something, please.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to be able to be in this role, and it's great to highlight the importance of the work that we do.
Thank you. I'll turn to the board for any comments or reflections on this item. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ed. That's a niche area, I got to say. 2% of the trees in the whole Southern Valley and all that, and you're the steward over that. I really appreciate that work. I appreciate that attention. And I also appreciate that kind of coordination that you've also illustrated with the Native Americans, the way they've managed their land. I think that's a really great statement in Lane County. We're a timber, forest, ecological county, and people like you managing that the way we should, I think, is a really great statement to the county and their role. I'm just curious, is there someone who may take your place when you're not doing this kind of work? Is there a young Ed that's coming up, we're hoping?
Well, I just say that there are a lot of great people working in this area, in this field, in this area, and so if and when that time comes, I'm sure there'll be lots of good candidates.
Well, I'm not kicking you out yet. You got lots of years left, and we appreciate what you're doing, Ed. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I don't have time to say as much as I'd like to say at this point in time. We can talk about general experiences. We can talk about general landscapes and just the high altitude view. Let's talk about personal experiences a little bit. My personal experience with our grandchildren in the land that you are helping preserve, it is invaluable. They are enwrapped each time we go there, and we go there very often. We go there 10 or 15 times a year. And they, as they grow up right now, the two that I'm talking about are kindergarten and third grade. They've grown up with your work. They've grown up in the midst of your work, understanding and appreciating your work. Don't worry about what I think. Be proud of what they think. And they say, good job.
Well, I will just add my appreciation for your work, and it's particularly important because we really are at risk of, as the old Joni Mitchell song says, paving paradise and putting up a parking lot, and take all the trees and put them in a tree museum, right? We don't want tree museums. We want natural habitats that are well-maintained and respected, and it's really important to remember that this isn't, it's an astounding number that there are only 2% of the Willamette Valley's original prairie and savanna. That's actually not a statistic to be proud of, and it's a statistic to really be motivated to protect even further every decision we make. We talk a lot about the people we serve, but the environment in which those people exist and the connection of the ecology of that environment is vitally important. So hearing about this morning is just a really good reminder about the totality of what Lane County encompasses and how our decisions impact all of that. So thank you very much for your work. And Ed, as is always the case, I know Steve has a certificate for you and Devin wants to do a quick photo. So thank you for making time this morning and coming in, and especially thank you for your work.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, we will now move into public comment. Thank you to those of you who came to provide comment for your patience as we move through that item. Thank you, Cameron. Public comment is the opportunity for folks in the community to come and speak for up to 3 minutes to the board on any item that's on your mind. We will take everyone who signed up here in Harris Hall first. I'll check with Jessica to see if anyone signed up online, and then I'll check back in the hall to see if someone arrived late and didn't get a chance to sign in. When I call your name, please come to the podium. When you state your name for the record, your 3 minutes will begin and the timer is up there on the wall. So our first speaker this morning is DJ Kelly Quattrocchi, who will be followed by Anna Lardner.
Good morning, Chair Trieger, Commissioners. As Chair Trieger said, my name is DJ Kelly Quattrocchi. I live in District 4. I'm a small business owner. I provide diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused support to local nonprofits, to higher education, to government agencies. I was the chair of the Lane County Equity and Access Advisory Board during the COVID-19 pandemic, and most recently I supported the Equity Program as they relaunched their Equity Program Advisory Board. I am a mixed race and queer resident of our great county, and I'm here to talk today about continued support for the Lane County Equity Program and this idea of becoming a sanctuary county as well. Lane County is one of the largest counties in the state, and whether or not it feels like it, it is rather diverse as well. It's important that we keep the programs here that are really supporting the equity movements within the county administration to ensure that the administration continues to look and feel like the residents. One of Lane County's values focuses on equity and respect, and I did just want to remind you all that we need action, not just words. Specifically, you'll hear today some folks talking about becoming a sanctuary county, and specifically ensuring safety for our immigrant population, providing gender-affirming care to our trans residents, and safeguarding women's reproductive rights. Lane County must live its values as an organization, and the need to continue to center our work that the equity program supports, as well as this idea of a sanctuary county. Centering equity takes momentum. It takes persistence and it takes courage. This board has previously shown their understanding of this. They have acknowledged Pride Month, Indigenous Peoples Day. They've passed a resolution acknowledging racism as a public health crisis. And historically, every equity-focused resolution that has come forth before this board has been passed unanimously. Your continued leadership reminds us that justice begins here, with our community leaders. I hope that I can continue to trust you all, and that you keep the work of the equity program central to this work and consider the request of becoming a sanctuary county. Thank you for your time and hearing my comment.
Thank you for your public comment. Next, we'll hear from Anna Lardner, who will be followed by Amanda Noble Flannery.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Anna Lardner, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm here today because a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago at this point in time, Commissioner Trieger, among the other commissioners, all talked about the need for specific action items and not just requests for generalized statements. And today I want to talk about one of those specific action items, one that DJ, who's amazing, will also introduce in his own statement. I'm also here because the county has a track record, unfortunately, of being reactive and not proactive, and I want us to be proactive today in considering this request. A few weeks ago, back on December 4th, the Supreme Court heard arguments in Scrimeti versus Tennessee. Scrimeti v. Tennessee was a major gender-affirming care case in which the Supreme Court considered whether or not states could ban gender-affirming care for minors. Based off of early analysis of that, as well as if you listen to the arguments, it looks like that will be upheld and states will be able to ban gender-affirming care for minors by the state legislature. We don't currently have this challenge in Oregon, but that could change, and it could definitely change at the federal level. In addition, Trump has indicated that he is interested in potentially going after birthright citizenship, which is part of our Constitution. It is unclear if he can actually do this, but the threat of him doing it is scary enough, and we need to take preemptive action to prevent things like this from affecting our county's residents. Back on Saturday, I spoke at a Eugene Human Rights Commission panel and talked about this. DJ was there as well. And I talked about the need for a specific sanctuary county policy that would cover all organizations and all agencies under the Lane County government umbrella. A sanctuary county would offer protections not just for reproductive health care, but also for undocumented immigrants, as well as for gender-affirming care, gender-diverse individuals, and all folks in the LGBTQ community. To some extent, the county already has protections against cooperation with federal law enforcement. The sheriff's office has similar specific protections. There are loopholes to those. Those also depend on federal interpretations of laws. What if Oregon's sanctuary law, as at the state level, was to be ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court in its 6-3 conservative majority? Would we go with what the law said, or would we go with what is right? Legality is not morality in times like this, and it is important that we institute procedures and policies, our sanctuary county policy in particular, in order to safeguard Lane County's values and people. Same with gender-affirming care. A federal ban would likely impact people here in the county, and we need to ensure both the ongoing continuation of care as well as protections from discrimination for those people. So again, I encourage the county here to be proactive and not reactive and take this action before these threats come to pass to insulate our county and our people from these threats. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. Next is Amanda Noble Flannery, who will be followed by Jacob Griffin.
Hello, my name is Amanda Noble Flannery. My pronouns are she, her. I'm speaking today as a Lane County resident. I live in Eugene. Thank you for the recent and important progress that's been possible because of the Board of County Commissioners and county programs prioritizing equity. The Equity Strategic Plan reflects thoughtful community engagement, a commitment to transparency, and an understanding of the need for systemic policy change. Additionally, I want to celebrate many board resolutions like racism as a public health crisis, acknowledging Pride Month, and committing to an annual hate and bias report, acknowledging Indigenous Peoples Day, and committing to an intergovernmental tribal relations work group. The reinstatement of the Equity Program Advisory Board after a 2-year break, the unanimous voting by this board on every equity initiative brought forward, Ferry Street Village Monument Project, the Native Potlucks, the Equity Program Advisory Board are all examples of investments in community trust building. As you know, what you communicate with your words, your votes, and your budget matters. Just as equity programs increase trust, removing them can be detrimental to the work that has happened over the years to gain the community's trust in government and to all of the systems and programs. Equity work requires persistence, vigilance, and the courage to face systemic challenges head-on. The community is paying attention and will continue to hold you accountable for delivering on the Equity Strategic Plan promises. Local governments serve as a crucial buffer against potential inequities or rollbacks at the state or federal levels. We rely on you to be an unwavering layer of protection for our diverse communities. I echo what DJ and Anna's comments about the sanctuary county with strengthened protections for undocumented immigrants, reproductive health care, queer people, and gender-affirming care for all ages, and discrimination protections for all transgender and gender-diverse individuals. Your leadership in equity reminds us all that justice begins at home. I'm asking that you keep equity a priority and that you communicate with all of our communities why you are doing so. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Jacob Griffin, who will be followed by Amy Ansa.
Good morning. My name is Jacob Griffin. And last night when I was preparing for this, I realized that, I live in District 3. I realized that the last time I spoke to you was almost exactly 25 years ago when I appeared here as the acting library director to talk about providing library service to the rural areas. I left soon after that for Berkeley and then for Ventura County in California. But when I left here in my 40s, I said, no matter what, I'm coming back here when I retire. I was in my 40s, and you know how you make those promises. And then 8 years ago, my wife and I came up here and bought a house. And soon thereafter, my daughter told me she was pregnant, and I said, if you had told me that earlier, I would have bought a house earlier. But those things are important to me. The fact that I came back here and the fact that my grandchild is growing up here. The reason I came back is because Lane County was such a welcoming and diverse county. I was, at that time, a lesbian, and it was very hard to be a department head pretty much anywhere as an out lesbian, and I was hired here, accepted here, promoted here, and cared for here. And that made a tremendous difference to me in both my job and my life. And I wanted to be part of that as a retired person. I came back here. I have been active in the community. I'm on the board of my synagogue. A group of trans people meets at my house every couple of weeks so we can talk about how to keep ourselves safe. I feel very engaged here. Unexpectedly, at 62, I transitioned. And while everyone else has talked about the importance of what you need to do, I want to talk about the importance of being trans and being happy. Nothing in my life gives me the joy that discovering at 62 I had been in the wrong body and now was in the right body. And what I need you to do is to protect me and that joy and all the trans children that are growing up in your community. The French Society of Endocrinologists 2 days ago announced that there is no reason to ban puberty blockers. There is no reason not to give children appropriate gender care. We need to keep that in mind. We need to care for our children. And so I am asking you to create a sanctuary county, to create a situation in which our children can feel safe and celebrated as who they are, and get to grow up to be the people that you want in your community to help grow it. And I remind you that we are looking for care for undocumented workers, for reproductive rights, and for queer safety and health care. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Amy Ansa, who will be followed by David Eigel.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Amy Ansa. I live in District 3, and I've been out as a transgender woman for the last 13 years. I've seen a lot of really great changes, and I've seen a few not so great changes, and we're right in the throes of one of those right now. As a community, we are very scared. We don't know if we can grow our family. We don't know if we can get the surgeries and the hormone treatments that we need. I have 4 children, 2 of which are trans. One of them is currently doing hormone replacement therapy, and they're 16, and it saved their life. And people will die, kids will die, if they're not able to get the care that they need. And transphobia, unfortunately, is alive and well in Oregon and in Lane County. And although it is better in Lane County than a lot of other places, people who come here are often taken aback by anti-trans undercurrents. A lot of good work has been done by the state, city, and county governments, including the Equity Program Advisory Board being reinstated and Lane County's Equity Strategic Plan. It's a great start, but it needs to continue and it needs to expand. We need to know that we're going to be okay, and we need to know that you are with us. We need to know that no matter what happens under this new administration, that local government, which is the government that most affects people's daily lives, is going to protect us and fight for us. There are so many organizations here in Lane County and nationwide that are advocating for the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming people, but we can't do it without you. I am echoing the statement that I support an enhanced sanctuary county for undocumented immigrants, freeing them from any federal immigration law enforcement and any cooperation with federal law enforcement. I also want protections for reproductive health care, LGBT and trans folks, especially when it comes to gender-affirming care, and then, of course, housing and job discrimination. And there's just so much on the line here, and I work with the community a lot in my volunteer work, and we're at a loss. We don't know what to do. We don't know who to talk to. We don't know where to go. And people are coming here from all over the country because they know that Lane County is a place that cares about them and their values and their lives and their health. And I want that to continue. I'm desperate for it to continue. And y'all can make the difference, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is David Eigel, who will be followed by Nikki Linder.
David Eigel. My efforts to expose the cheap slur on the reputation of Professor Frederick Dunn are now producing results. I soon expect to be testifying before a state legislative committee. Last week, I again spoke to the U of O trustees, where I pointed out that President Scholl's office has claimed to possess incontrovertible evidence that Dunn was the local Klan chapter chairman, and that despite repeated requests, this office has been unable to provide this evidence. This evidence doesn't exist. Professor Dunn was one of the finest human beings that the U of O and the city of Eugene ever produced. He was not the local leader, nor active with the local chapter of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan Fraternal Order. His family is very upset because of this slur on his reputation. The U of O Dunn report is a farce that the then U of O President Schill used to play campus politics with. For example, according to the Dunn report, Dunn made no secret of his dual role as college professor and Klansman. The report offers no primary source of support. The report merely cited Eckhart Toy's 1992 article in which the fiction of Dunn leading the Klan first appeared. Toy had no primary source documentation. He had invented this previously unknown fable and passed it off as documented history. Schill repeatedly used the denaming to loudly claim as his accomplishment on the national stage. In 2017, in a public panel on campus, this was used to further publicize the denaming. Schill described the report as terrific in his discussion of Oregon's racist past. He reported that so many people had told him that they didn't know that Oregon was like this. He smirkingly said, "I gotta watch what I say about Oregonians. There's this horrible underbelly. It exists even now." Months before his departure from the U of O, I had completed my copyrighted article on the Dunn Hall denaming scandal. Mr. Schill, as president-elect of Northwestern University, provided a long list of his accomplishments at the U of O. Without explanation, the Dunn Hall denaming was not included. It was not included in his accomplishments. I again asked that each of the commissioners email the U of O trustees and president's office and ask to see a copy of the incontrovertible evidence that Dunn was the local Klan leader. They incontrovertibly will not be able to do this. And incidentally, Professor Dunn's great-great-grandson was supposed to be a student here at the U of O in 2016. He was registered, ready to go. Schill pulled this stunt, and he and his family decided he should go elsewhere. This is really sad, needs to finally be wound up and dealt with. It's all documented. It's baloney, the whole story. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Nikki Linder, who will be followed by, looks like Kenji Shimizu.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Nikki Linder. My pronouns are she and her. I am a proud longtime resident of District 2 in Springfield, and I am here to address comments specifically made by Commissioner Lovall in the December 3rd meeting where I came to address equity issues. You said, Commissioner Lovall, that diversity is not Springfield's top priority, inclusion is. You also said that we don't spend a lot of time talking about how we're different, and that is very concerning to me. This is concerning to me because we are different. We have different needs, and failing to recognize those do not actually make us more inclusive. It makes us less inclusive and less equitable. People struggling to put food on the table have much different needs than those who are figuring out where to invest their excess cash. Working families have different needs than those who do not need to struggle with paying or finding childcare in a state that is made up of mostly childcare deserts. Disabled folks like myself have different needs than those who are able-bodied, and refusing to acknowledge difference doesn't make those needs go away. It simply prevents you from seeing them and governing in such a way that everybody's needs are met. Without acknowledging diversity and the myriad ways our communities show up in the world, you are likely unaware that those needs even exist. For example, before I became disabled, I likely wouldn't have noticed that this part of this building lacks elevators. And yes, I did see the wheelchair lift. And as an ambulatory wheelchair user, I would have used that if I was coming in with my chair, but it is not appropriate for those of us who are ambulatory but still struggle with mobility issues. The 3 ADA accessible parking spots outside of this building were taken by the time I arrived, and I nearly had to turn around. I was running very late due to an inability to find parking here. I likely wouldn't have understood that we need more accessible parking. I wouldn't have noticed these things if I didn't experience it myself, lived with someone who experiences it themselves, or heard from someone who experienced it themselves. Refusing to acknowledge diversity only leaves you with blind spots, and I apologize to the blind community if there's a better way to say that. Without acknowledging difference, you cannot possibly expect to govern in an equitable way that takes everybody's needs into consideration because you simply won't be aware of them. Our incoming president has stated that he intends to go after programs and funding that support our most marginalized communities. It will be absolutely incumbent upon our local leaders and imperative that you ensure our community does not suffer as a result of these attacks on programs and funding that ensure that we all have a fair shot in this country and in this county.
Thank you.
Please do not take diversity out of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is critically important to maintain everybody's viewpoints so that you can understand our community's needs. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next is Kenji Shimizu. And that's the last person I have signed up here in Harris Hall today.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Ken Shimizu, and I wanted to talk about my experience with the equity program. I'm the owner of small photography business here in our community. For the past 4 years, I've been working on a project called Diversity Project, with the hope of creating a visual representation of underrepresented groups and raising awareness of understanding of each community and the future generations. The first series of this project was showcased in downtown Eugene, the OSU Museum, and featured in publications like Vogue. The positive feedback I received from the community has been incredibly encouraging. It's inspired me to continue, which is why I'm working on the second version now. Undertaking of a project like this requires a significant amount of personal time, and producing a large-scale prints is costly for a small business, even with interest from local venues that are willing to display our work. Recently, I was awarded funding from Lane County Equity Program, which has truly changed the course of this project. With this support, I can now produce the prints for the communities that are eager to showcase the importance of presentations. It's also allowing me to photograph more community members with the potential of displaying these images in public spaces for those who might not engage with social media. This is the most significant support I've received for both my art and the cause I believe in. While these are not exact quotes, I've received feedback like, it was so nice to see my people being represented, and I finally felt like I'm not alone. Many people have reached out asking how they can be part of this project and share their own community's stories. I believe that continuing to represent all community members visually will help foster familiarity, strengthen our sense of connections, and keep our community united. I came here to give a big thank you to Equity Program for their invaluable support and providing all of us a sense of community and support. So many community members deeply appreciate what they do. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your public comment. Jessica, at this time, I'll check in with you to see if there's anyone signed up online who wishes to provide testimony to the board this morning.
Chair, for those joining us virtually, if you would like to give public comment at this meeting, please raise your virtual hand. I see one hand raised. Our speaker will be Wendy Kellington. Wendy, I have unmuted you. Would you like to be on camera?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Very good. You have 3 minutes to give your public comment. You may begin.
Thank you, Jessica. Members of the board, Honorable Chair Wendy Kellington here. I represent the Lane County Garbage and Recycling Association, and I submitted a letter for the record yesterday that I believe is a part of your packet. Lane County Garbage and Recycling objects to the agenda item T9C and would respectfully put the board on notice that that agenda item seeks your authorization for an unlawful expenditure exposing the commission to civil penalties under a state statute called ORS 294.100. That agenda item asks the board to spend $354,810 of the public's money and to authorize the county administrator to promptly execute a contract obliging the county to spend that money on Clean Lane, which is a land use project that requires 11 acres of wetlands be filled that has not been finally approved, and for which there is very good reason to think that it cannot be approved. It is against the law for the county to spend and commit to spend the public's money for unlawful purposes, which include spending money, committing the county to spend more than $250,000 of the public's money on a project that there is evidence that it cannot ever happen and may never happen. The agenda item asks you to roll the fiscal dice and spend significant public money on an unknown. At worst, it asks you to oblige the county to enter into a contract for the expenditure of money that you have every reason to know cannot be performed. There are a lot of smart people who have demonstrated and weighed in, including several lawyers, that the Clean Lane project is unlawful in its Goshen zone. Therefore, the Lane County Garbage and Recycling Association asks the board and puts the board on notice that it should not continue to commit the public's money on this project that, even in the best case, is a possibility of being established, and in the worst case, cannot be established, because once you're committed, the county will suffer contractual damages for not performing, and the law does not allow you to do that.
Thank you. That concludes your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Harris Hall wishing to speak with the board, in front of the board this morning? Seeing none, I will close public comment, and thank you all for being here. I will offer a few minutes for each commissioner who may wish to give any response, and I will just note we still have our consent calendar to adopt, and we do have a 10 a.m. time certain in the conference room, so we need a couple of minutes of transition time. We have outside guests joining us for that item. But with that, I will turn it over to the board for any comment or response. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. First, Ms. Smoker-Eisky, I'm going to tell you, give you notice of this is a telegraph. Later in this meeting, I'm going to be providing an agenda team request. I'll detail that in just a few seconds. Jacob Griffith, you're still here. 25 years ago, I was in my 5th year as a Eugene City Councilor. Welcome to Lane County that time. A good testimony today. Thank you. Ami Ansa, you said something that really is poignant, and I wrote it down. You're here. We need to know we are going to be okay. We do. I'm going to pause on that for a second. Then Amanda Noble Flannery, you were here. It's good to see you. It's been some time since we've seen each other in person, I think. And you or anyone else holding me accountable for my actions is good news indeed. But I've got to tell you, and you probably no surprise, it pales in the accountability that I hold myself in, and it pales in the accountability that my family holds me in. But thank you for the good news that I'm being held accountable. Ms. Smoker-Eisky, later in this meeting today, I've been discussing this over the weekend with my family and others, and I'm going to be making an agenda team request. I'll give you the 5 points of the request, but there'll be more detail in the request later on. I'm going to be asking for a statement or declaration regarding Lane County as a sanctuary county, which will include providing agenda time for local agency testimony. I'll also be asking for a DOJ presentation on the Oregon sanctuary law, and a discussion regarding the provision of gender-affirming medication in Lane County health clinics, and also a discussion on the security and employment of our local workforce. More detail to come at the end of the day in a written statement, but I'll be asking for the board's head nods on that later today. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming. It's certainly a vulnerable place for you to come in a odd power dynamic for you to come and speak so eloquently about your personal journey through transition, through gender-affirming care. You certainly have an ally in me. I appreciate every single time you come and speak to us. I get a perspective that I don't get at home or in other realms of my life. And that is so very important to us on the board as leaders in the community. It is absolutely imperative that we get diverse voices at the table, and you bring that here. Thank you, thank you, thank you for doing that and showing up for us as we need to show up for you. I certainly support my fellow commissioner's statement. All those things are highly valuable to me in this position, and you deserve our protection. You deserve living a happy, wonderful life here in Lane County. I want to see that for everybody, not just a few. Thank you again for showing up.
Commissioner Seneca.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We've said it before, it takes a lot to come here and stand at the podium and talk, so I really appreciate everybody showing up. One thing that was hit on that is that I care a lot about. I've mentioned it, but I'm on a school board still, and so we get a lot of emails about adolescents and gender care and so on and so forth. And they do have an abnormally high suicide rate. And the one thing that everybody agrees on that I fully support and will continue to support is, gender counseling and explaining through this with kids, and getting to them young and talking through these concerns and issues is a huge part of where we need to be and how we need to intervene in their young, tender lives and do everything we can to help them. So thanks for bringing that up. That's a great point. And yeah, appreciate it.
Vice Chair.
Chair, thank you all again for coming out. It's a tense nerve, excuse me, that I'm feeling that you're feeling. I feel your fear. I feel your concern. I hear your concern. And I am committed to doing something about that. So I have been in my life in a position to where I understand the plights of many people on many different continents of my life, to pave the way for the care of people, to nurture their needs, and to stay with them to whatever level of success they aspire to. That's been my life work as a missionary in this world, and it continues to be my life work as a governmental official. So I am encouraged that you brought that to our attention and that you're holding us accountable, and I appreciate that because I need to be held accountable. I work for you. The thing that I think is a very interesting statement that, Amy, you made was that we're at a loss and don't know what to do. But people come here from all over. So I look at that statement and I hear what you're saying and feel what you're saying, that sometimes we're at a loss of what to do. But I think I also hear in that statement that Lane County is doing a lot right. If we're not doing a lot right, then people wouldn't be coming here. So I think that culture has been instilled and inspired within Lane County of a part that I represent, obviously, and the whole county as well as Springfield, and I think that culture is going to continue. So I'm hoping that at least those words that I spoke today can at least subside some of your fears, because, we are doing a lot right and we'll continue to do a lot right. We have a board of county commissioners here that are committed to doing the right thing, and that's what I think we'll be doing in the future. So I'm hoping that you'll trust us and that you'll allow us to make mistakes if we make mistakes and right the ship when we need to, but I think we're on the right course. Thank you again for coming.
I'll add my deep appreciation to those of you who have been returning and those of you who are coming for the first time. Thank you all so much. I also want to offer my support and appreciation to Commissioner Farr for bringing up the indication that there'll be a future assignment, and hopefully we can work together to create an assignment that really covers the depth and breadth that such a thing deserves, that we get all the information, the analysis, so any action we take is meaningful and actionable. And not simply a statement, which is not what I heard you ask for. I want to be clear, but I'm just stating that that's important to me, that we make sure we take the time to do that right in a way that can really make a lasting difference. I really appreciate everyone who spoke, and particularly to my queer community. I have the privilege of a sort of passing queerness that a lot of the folks who came to present today do not have. And I very much appreciate you bringing your full selves, your joy, your anguish, your fear, your hope. And I really, my goal and my life's work is to make a world where people don't have to come and ask of folks with greater privilege and power to have the same rights that those folks sitting here at the dais have, that you're not asking for our protection. It is a given. that you're not asking for laws to change, that those laws that put those barriers and those inequities in place never passed in the first place. I do also want to specifically state, it's good to see you again, DJ, serving together on the Equity and Access Board. We were there at a time when there were concerns specifically about law enforcement and cooperation with federal agents, and that is state law. I have checked with the sheriff recently as 2 weeks ago, and been assured, because I've had a lot of outreach from folks, particularly working with immigrant populations with that concern, but he follows all state law, and the state law has that very specific piece covered. But as many of you mentioned, there's a lot more nuance and complexity to be covered to ensure that everyone in our community is safe and respected. And I just want to point out as well, when we talk about gender-affirming care, we can talk specifically about gender-affirming care for trans people, but gender-affirming medical care exists for all people. There are many, many people on a broad spectrum of all gender expressions and stages and ages of life, and gender-affirming care starts as simply as any one of us walking into a doctor's office and being addressed by the pronouns that we use. It starts at that most basic line, so I want to make sure we're not ramping up and dialing up to a level of discourse around that specific item that some will do. And also to assure folks again here today that our clinics that we operate here at Lane County do provide gender-affirming care. And we do that also for folks who are in our custody, who are in the criminal justice system, whether they're youth or adults. So we are doing a lot right at Lane County, but you're right, it is at risk for us as well, because this incoming administration has made indications that are antithetical to the values that we hold here. And so we do need to put some local, put a local firewall around those protections. So, and we also need to do it, as somebody up here mentioned, for our own workforce, our own staff. We are an organization of 2,000 individuals. Many, many folks within our organization hold multiple identities, as do their family members. So we owe it to ourselves as an organization and to the constituents in the community to do this work. So thank you all for bringing that front and center for us today. With that, we will move into the consent calendar. This is a number of items considered to be routine business, and they will be passed in a single motion. The materials are all available online, and I will look for a motion.
Chair, I move adoption and approval of the consent calendar for Tuesday, December 17th, 2024.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. All those in favor of adopting today's consent calendar signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. With that, at the sound of my gavel, we will be in recess just long enough to, yes.
I'm sorry.
That's fine, yes.
Would it be okay to do my announcements?
Sure, we have a minute for that.
For a
Yep.
couple minutes. I invited Mike Finch, our Chief Information Officer here, and I know you have, and we're transitioned, so maybe just like 3-minute update. Wanted to just respond to some really great public comments last week that we heard from, Mike, remind me.
Yeah, Dr. Sam.
Yes, thank you. And so let me just ask, we shared those comments with Mike and wanted to invite, we had some conversation about the different, the various robust ways in which we're dealing with cybersecurity in Lane County, and so wanted to have Mike give you just sort of the highlights of some of that work.
Thank you. You can put my 3-minute timer up there, so I'll be good, just because I know you have things to get to. But just really quickly, I want to thank Dr. Sam Schwartz for coming forward, and what great use of public comment to share his skill and expertise in raising something it is so often not thought about, right? We're so busy in the act of doing, forget. We've been imbued more and more with superpowers to do our work. So it was really great. He talked about reputational risk, financial loss risk, data loss, system downtime, so some of those things. I think what I most hope to do today is build upon the stage he provided to have a conversation of some things that are available, not only just to Lane County, but all of our public agencies and many nonprofits for services. So that's really what I'm hoping to use for time today, to talk about those services, to make you aware of them, and hopefully through this meeting, our broader community of these services that are available. So just really quick, at the federal level, so we partner at all levels to protect Lane County, our organization. And those services, again, are available to many at the federal level. there's of course the crime aspect. So the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, is one agency we all have on speed dial here that we bring in to go after the threat actors and help tackle that work. So it's important to form relationships with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies to tackle the crime. From a prevention standpoint, a lot of services available out there that everyone should be considering taking advantage of with the Department of Homeland Security, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, we call it CISA. They're outstanding partners, even both public and private sector. They will go out and they monitor the dark web and other places for domains that are for sale. Very recently, we had a county very close to us whose domain was for sale on the dark web, and they were able to reach out ahead of time and let them know so they could take action and cleanse their network of nefarious accounts that had already been installed and were ready to be activated once sold. So often, when things are compromised, it isn't those getting the credentials that will do the deed. They just sell them. And it becomes this whole sort of commodities industry. So CISA, they also partner us with services for free, such as the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, MSISAC. We use that for monitoring our traffic. They receive information from the FBI and CISA on known places on the internet that are unsafe to go to. And they monitor our services and will spot if servers are trying to go out to IP addresses that are known bad actors. And we get alerts several times a year, and we have to go pull those machines and stop that threat from going on. So MSISAC. I also want to mention quickly ITDRC. That is a nationwide nonprofit information technology disaster resource center that provides services, and actively in Oregon through fire season, ice season, they supply technology to anybody responding to disaster, including technology disasters, and they helped in Curry County tremendously. So they responded to the hurricanes, yet no one knows about them. They will even help nonprofits with donated equipment that are helping serve the community if it's in the community's interest. So itdrc.org. At the state level, I just want to call out a bill that Representative Nathanson co-sponsored for the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence that partners with our university system to create cyber services and to bring in students who are training to help support those services, training the next generation of our workforce to be able to come into this field. We locally, I would be remiss not to mention Kim Morgan's great work in our Cybersecurity and Compliance Division as our County Information Security Officer. Her and her team have worked tirelessly here to create a great culture of feeling safe and encouraged to report anything that is concerning out there. And we've actually gotten to the point where they are reporting legitimate emails because they're concerned. That's right where you want to be. So that's about building that great culture Dr. Schwartz talked about. And kudos to her team. We recently did a local regional desktop exercise with the city of Eugene. Actually, Representative Nathanson sat in on that as well. So a lot of work going on, great. And I'll just close quickly by, again, thanking this board. Curry County is something Dr. Schwartz mentioned as an example. This board, and frankly you, Steve, and our emergency manager at the time, Patience, and I know Tiffany would too, supported being mutual aid, being able to respond to mutual aid. We sent probably at least a dozen of our staff there at different times to help out. Not just helping a partner, but we learned so much from that exercise. It was a privilege and an honor to serve as incident commander for that exercise. That particular event was a nexus of understanding for emergency management and cybersecurity on the critical role. Apparently I'm a rare individual with ICS training and emergency management. Thank you to Patience who invested in that in this county and supporting that to bring an understanding of incident commands systems and an understanding of technology terms, which were really confusing. So that has launched a nationwide dialogue. We were able to speak actually nationwide. Our county, the state SWIC, that's the statewide interoperability coordinator, along with Department of Homeland Security. They funded that for us. We didn't have to pay for that to speak nationwide and be front at the table for this. So I would just leave it there, but I just want to leave it as if anybody in the community would like to reach out and learn more about this. IT no longer just serves the back of the house. We're very active in broadband, digital equity, and cybersecurity. So please reach out to me, michael.finch@lincolncountyor.gov. Spread the word. We're here to help everybody, including our organization. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. All right, well, now, at the sound of my gavel, we will be in recess just long enough to move up to the conference room for our next item. Doop, doop. Welcome back from recess. This is a continuation of the regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners for Tuesday, December 17, 2024. We are at item 8 on our agenda. This is an item from County Administration. Discussion only is the first item up on working towards a 2025-2027 Lane County Strategic Plan. And I will turn it over to Jeff Kincaid from staff to kick off the item and introduce our guests.
Thanks, Chair Trieger. Do you have anything, Steve, or you go ahead? Okay, perfect. So good morning, Chair Trieger, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Kincaid. I'm a Senior Operational Analyst in County Administration. Today I'm here to provide an update on the 2025 to 2027 strategic planning process, provide an introduction to Moss Adams, our partner in this project, and receive feedback from the board as we begin to really kick off this work. Joining us remotely are Annie Rose and Colleen from Moss Adams, but I'll let them introduce themselves after just a brief bit of background. I always like to talk about where we've been, and then we can talk about where we're going. So I say that like today we're here to kick off this work, but really we started this back in July where we met and talked about your input on what you'd like the process to look like and really begin the process to get a consultant on board to assist with this work. Since then, we've done a formal RFP, scored a dozen responses to that, which were pretty robust, conducted finalist interviews with the chair and vice chair and the county administrator, and then we've also fully executed the contract as of last week for Moss Adams to support us in this work. So I know that the board and the organization as a whole are excited to begin. So with that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Annie Rose and Colleen, and they're going to introduce their team and present the proposed work plan.
Thank you. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. So much for having virtually with me here today. I'm Annie Rose Fabro, for those of you who I haven't met yet. I'm a director at the Moss Adams team, and I specialize in strategic planning, organizational development, and governance for public sector organizations. So I spend a lot of my time with leadership teams figuring out where are we today, where do we want to be going in the future, how are we going to get there? And I'm really looking forward to working with you on this project. We have a short presentation for you today, but I will hand it over to Colleen to introduce herself before I go ahead and share my screen.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to meet you and nice to see those of you that we met last month. My name is Colleen Rosillas. I'm a partner at Moss Adams, and I'm the firm's government national practice leader. I've been a public sector consultant for more than 20 years and have written dozens of strategic plans. Really happy to be here and working on this project with you all.
All right, can everyone see the slides okay here?
Yep. We can, yes.
Great. So we just have a quick presentation. We wanted to share a little bit more about our team, some of the members who aren't with us here today, and then we want to get into some of the process of what we are hoping this work will look like before opening up for questions back and all of that. So Colleen, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, great. If you just want to go forward a couple of slides. So we're going to just cover a little bit about the firm. You probably have heard of Moss Adams. We have an office in Eugene. We've also got offices in Portland and Medford, and actually we have more than 1,000 employees in Oregon. We have a really large group of folks who actually specialize in our government practice in Oregon, and we have served hundreds of organizations across the state of Oregon, including other counties, cities and special purpose districts, utilities, and quite a few state agencies. So we both live and work in Oregon, and so we understand the importance of the state's values, of your organizational values, as well as things like the job market, the competitiveness of the economy, things like that, that we have to be really thoughtful about as we go into a strategic planning process. And we're really looking forward to learning the ins and outs of Lane County and hoping that we can bring some of our other experiences with other governments around the state to be able to build your really robust plan. On the next slide, I just have a little bit about our government practice. So our firm is organized by industry. We don't really have people who moonlight across different industries. We really have specialists in the firm. So we have
more than 450 folks who work in the consulting, audit, and a little bit of tax, mostly kind of state and local tax nerd stuff in the government space. But we're really involved in standard setting agencies, in things across the country, associations, organizations like ICMA or Transforming Local Government, the Association of Local Government Auditors. And so that helps us to really stay on top of also trends and best practices. And our goal is to really help you to develop that plan that works for you and hopefully bring in experience from other entities. On the next slide, I have just a little highlight of our strategic planning experience. And what we have highlighted here are just strategic plans we've done in the last 3 years with other entities in Oregon. And that ranges from the Port of Cascade Lock, so a very unique special purpose district, the Burns Paiute tribes, really thinking about tribal government. And that's something that working with the 9 tribes in Oregon is definitely something that county and state governments run up against, as well as a couple of counties and the city of Salem, which is where I am today. Not that you can tell from my beautiful California poppy background. But on the next slide, we have our list, our pictures of the folks we're going to work with the most on this project. So you see Annie Rose and I right there. So she'll be your project manager and your lead facilitator, and you're going to work with her quite a bit. I'm going to provide quality assurance and also help with facilitation on this project. And I'm kind of your ultimate escalation point for anything that you need as our client. And then we have a couple of other folks who will be serving in facilitation and key roles. Jesse will be a core facilitator on this project. Maria is a specialist in public sector equity, and she actually sits on a committee leading the equity tools and assessment work nationwide. And then James will be the lead analyst on this project. And Annie Rose, over to you.
Fantastic. And something I should have said in my introduction is that also Lane County is my home county. This is where I grew up. So I am personally really excited to be working on this project as well through that lens. But as a reminder, I don't surprise to anyone here thinking about the project itself. We're going to be working with you to develop the next strategic plan, thinking what are those major priorities that you want the county to be focused on, that you need to be focused on, and also what is the actual pathway to achieve those goals? What are the action items that you'll be undertaking to get where you're hoping to go? So that when we talk about strategic plan, that phrase can mean a lot of different things to different people. So we always like to kind of ground it. What do we mean by a strategic plan? And I'm sure, again, this is probably very familiar to you all because this is a lot of what some of your previous strategic plans had as well. But we want to start with vision, mission, and values. These are the principles. These are the things that really describe what do we do? Why do we do it? What is important about how we go about this work together. And we want all of the rest of the strategic plan to really come from these pieces. It should really cascade down from the vision, mission, and values that are at the beginning of the process. So we're going to be coming back and kind of revisiting those statements that you have currently, seeing if there needs to be any adjustments made there, but making sure we begin the process with those really important points. Then coming down about strategic goals. We'll be working with all of you through an iterative process that I'll describe in a moment to really understand what are the key strategic goals that the county needs to be focusing on in the next few years here. These are your kind of broadest descriptors of your priorities. Then underneath each strategic goal, we'll be building out more specific objectives. Those are kind of the measurable steps that give a sense of the specific items that you might be doing in order to accomplish those goals. And then under the objectives, we'll have the most tactical level, which is the action items of what are we actually going to be doing in order to achieve those objectives that roll up to the goal. And finally, we definitely want to focus on performance measures as well. How are you going to know that you're making progress in this space? And so that is always a part of our strategic planning work too, so that we can make sure that not only do you have this roadmap, but you have a good sense of when are we going to be checking in, what information are we to be measuring on a regular basis to ensure not we're on or off track with this work. So that's, there may be elements that we add to the strategic plan document we're going to focus on through our development work with you all. I had mentioned before, we want this to be an iterative process. By that, we mean we want to be bringing in the input of this group as leaders of the getting your input on things, the vision, the value, priority in county moving forward. Also to be bringing in information from other groups here. So the first group that we have listed, your management and staff team, obviously they have a really important in this work in terms of they're seeing ground, what is working, what isn't, some of the needs of the community coming up. So this is an area where we be certainly bringing in your senior management staff perspective throughout this process. We also want to be focusing on community stakeholders. There's a diverse range of community needs here that we want to really inform the rest of the strategic planning process. The reason we're doing this work is to help meet the needs of your community. It's really critical for any strategic plan process that good understanding what those are. And for
just a minute, your audio is cutting in and out just a little bit. I don't know if there's anything you can do to fine tune at your end that might help that, but
yeah, give me 1 second here. Let me try a different audio
having trouble with that.
connection.
Yeah, okay. We're catching the gist of what you're saying, but it's making it a little hard to really get the full.
I think she might have frozen.
And just, I'll fill some time since while we're waiting for you to do that, to let folks know there was a small committee of us, including the vice chair and I, that reviewed the responses to our RFP for planners and how we landed on these folks. And just because they really checked every box and will be working with us in person in the future, just for this kickoff is why they're remote. And then for Annie Rose and her team, if you can hear us, just so you know that Tina's in the room with us, our data and analytics person. I don't know if you've met Tina, but just so you know, that's who's in the room. Since you can't see, she's not at the table with us, but she's here.
Perfect. Let's hope Annie Rose can rejoin. I can also share the presentation and we can keep going if you want to.
Well, and I can also take a moment. I failed to recognize, thank you, Chair, the team that's supporting this work, that Tina is on that team and everyone's watching remotely as well. Just so Judy Williams, Latifa Amato, Laura Holtgreave, and Tina, we're all kind of a team working together on this, and they're paying attention and interested in hearing the board's discussion and kicking off this work in earnest today. So
great, thank you. And then lastly, it looks like Annie Rose is back. I think you all know we also have an 11 o'clock item with other outside guests. So that's the timeline we're on this morning.
All right, any chance you can hear me now?
I think so. Keep going. I'll let you know if not, otherwise.
Fantastic. Apologies for the delay there. So I was just saying, we want to make sure that this is an iterative process, being an input from these various groups, because that is what we have found plans really strong, brilliant, comprehensive, and practical for you all moving forward. See that there's opportunity will we be bringing groups.
No, we're still getting a really spotty connection on the audio.
All right. Let me try one more thing here and then I'll hand it over to Colleen to see if we can keep going. And actually, Colleen, do you want to take us through this roles and responsibilities while I'm working on that?
I'd be happy to. So when we think about doing a strategic plan that involves all of the different stakeholders and making sure everyone's voice is heard, we use what we call a DAISY matrix. So we think about who is the driver who leads the project, who is approving what happens in the planning process, and who's consulted and who is informed. So you'll see here in that first take at this matrix. So we're your consultant, we're your facilitator, but this is your plan. So we're going to make sure the plan keeps moving throughout the process. And you are the ultimate decision makers. You're the folks setting policy and strategy for the county. So it makes sense that you're approving and really focusing on the approval of every piece of this plan. As Annie Rose mentioned, you'll be really focused right at that kind of mission, vision, values level to start, and that's very critical. And I'm going to share my screen so that way we can hopefully save some of Annie Rose's bandwidth, and that will make this easier. And we will be in person. Unfortunately, we were both at other client sites, so we couldn't make this one work. So let me just share the right screen, and then there we go. Okay. So when we think about who is consulted on this project, and Annie Rose covered this quite a bit, we want to hear from staff and management. We want to hear from the community. We also want to report back out. So what did we hear? What's important? How do we move forward in a way that acknowledges all of the different and wide variety of input we're going to get? And one of the challenges with a strategic plan in an organization like yours is that you cover a huge geographical span and you cover a huge swath of different types of communities. And so we're already talking with folks in the county. We're already trying to get into that piece of how do we make sure people are heard? How do we also make sure that we get the information out about the planning process in the appropriate ways so that people really feel like they can get on board with the process? And then finally, we've got Annie Rose, did you want to say anything else?
I was going to say, I'd love to try one last chance. How is my audio doing now?
It sounds better to me, but it's only after you talk for a little bit that it starts happening.
All right. Well, let me give it a shot on project milestones. So please pause and we can hand it over to Colleen if needed. So we want to do the work here to give you of the shape of how this work is going to come together. We highlighted and bolded the moments when the board is going to be having input and feedback in this process here, starting obviously with this meeting. In December, we're doing a lot of our initial project work. We've requested many documents. We are working on our interview list, putting survey drafts together, prepping for focus groups. We're doing a lot of the prep work this month. Then when we get into January, this is when we're going to really start our fact finding and information gathering. So we're going to have two different surveys that will go at that time. One is a community visioning survey to get input from community members. This will be open to all members of Lane County residents as well as other stakeholder groups there. We'll also be doing an employee visioning survey to get feedback from that level. We'll be having interviews with the senior management team, interviews with each one of you as well to understand your priorities and perspectives on this work. And we're going to begin conducting focus groups probably at the end of January. And these focus groups will be basically bringing together different particular groups within your communities. We're working with staff right now to identify who all will be actively invited here. But the idea is that we want to, again, get a very broad understanding from different community groups, beginning process around need, priorities, and those. Ideally, all work we will be able to bring and synthesize and bring a summary back for our first joint work session. And this will be with the board and your senior management team. This is going to be we'll have a SWOT analysis, that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and it's going to be informed by that fact finding. And that's just a snapshot of where are we today as a county? What are some of the things that we're going to want to take advantage of or work to as part of our planning process. We'll also be thinking about mission, vision, values, and beginning the discussion of strategic goals that work session. In between this work session and the next, we'll be getting additional input from you all to confirm, adjust, and refine some of the work that will begin in February. And if you go to the next slide, Colleen, we have just one more slide with some of these project milestones. In March, we will have about a month out from our first work session. We will have our second work session, and this one will be digging into objectives, activities, some of those performance measures. So we're going to a lot of the core elements, or at least the first draft of those core elements through these work sessions. Then in April, once we have some draft ideas together, we will bring that back to you all for additional review. And then that will fit into 2 other opportunities. We're going to be coming back to the community at that point. Again, another survey that's going to be accessible in a wide variety of ways in terms of folks will be able, the survey will be open for several links. We want to make this a pretty accessible way for people to provide input on that draft. And we're having some version, and we're still working through all the logistics of what exactly this will look like, but some version of open house for staff, both for them to provide input and community open houses. And this will be some combination of virtual and in-person work. But the idea here is to give community members an opportunity to come provide additional input, ask questions, all of that work. So that will be happening likely toward the end of April. Then as we get into May and June, that's when we're putting the finalization, we're incorporating the feedback that we'll have gathered April, gathering sort of final input from senior management at the board at that point, and then putting everything together so that it can be finalized and presented for adoption. So that is our current draft of these project milestones. Absolutely, we are open to feedback and input on those pieces as well. So with that, I think that is our final piece. And we would love to turn it back over to you all if you have questions or additional feedback from me or Colleen.
Great, thank you so much. Anything more from staff before we open it up for the conversation to the board? Commissioner Farr.
Wow. You know, I'm really excited about this. I've developed a really deep confidence in the work of Moss Adams, different divisions, obviously, but an understanding that you don't cross silos very often, but I expect the same kind of diligence that I've come to accustomed to with Moss Adams, particularly working with the staff here at Lane County. You know, I don't speak only for myself when I talk about the fact that I have worked on strategic plans for close to 4 decades now. I'm not the only one that's worked on strategic plans. I've worked on plans for private industry, for financial organizations, for nonprofits, for governments. What's really exciting about this is bringing your expertise to our specific needs here at Lane County, because that is where it really is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Because strategic plans all have similar elements. They all have to have similar elements, but they have to be fine-tuned to the specific organization. And with this in particular, we are a temporary board. There are 5 of us. The board changes from time to time, and we have to develop a strategic plan that is specific to this board, but it's also poignant in that it lasts beyond this board's tenure, that it is applicable to future boards. That's not easy. That's not easy, keeping politics out of it and keeping whims and personal needs out of it. And I'm excited about Moss Adams being a part of this. I really am truly excited about that. So congratulations to the officers for bringing this to us and to the staff for bringing this to us. I'm really looking forward to this work together.
Other questions, comments, thoughts from the board? And I will just say to Commissioner Farr's point, all strategic plans share certain elements, but it was important to me when we were reviewing the RFP responses that they not look like a group that sort of uses a cookie cutter or a template. And so I encourage my colleagues, if you have any more questions or want to learn more about the work of this team, they shared, they have linked on their website numerous other plans that they've done for agencies of different sizes in Oregon, cities, other counties. And that was a big part for me of what got me excited about working with these folks, was looking at the way they were able to contextualize the plans for the entities they were working with. And it was clearly they weren't trying to put these other groups into their structure, but really it demonstrated to me real listening and responsiveness to whatever's unique about the group they're working with. So
pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I'm going to take no questions as a good sign that everybody's just ready to move into the next step with full faith. Seeing people nodding. Yeah, great. Jeff, anything else you want to offer, or Steve?
If I may, Chair, I know that we had talked about, Mr. Mokrajewski had talked about Q1 and kind of as this process, the real priority has been like doing the plan right. We want to do, if we're doing this process, we really want to do things the right way. So you'll notice that the main thing was introducing Moss Adams, but then talking about these milestones and making sure that the board's expectations are met. So we're looking at that May, June, that finalization, just to note on that again. And we're really excited to kick off the work once we leave today. You can see all the things that have already started and then quite a bit to plan for in early 2025.
So to that, I guess sorry, Steve, before then you can kind of maybe wrap us up. As you were saying that, Jeff, and again, thinking about what Commissioner Farr offered up, can you share a little bit of how you bring forward, strategic plans are sort of a rolling document, and it's unusual for an organization that is achieving success and sort of on the right track to need a sort of wholesale rewrite of a strategic plan or completely redo it. It should look like there's some continuity, but of course we don't want to just say, oh, all those same things from the last 3 years, but change the numbers a little to reflect. Like, how do you manage working with the strategic plan that's already in place? Are you considering this a refresh, a redo? How do you work with that?
Yeah, great question. So we want to build on past work. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to make the efficient process for you all. And so part of that work will be, even when we're thinking about your mission, vision, and values, that's really an area where we see this as potentially a refresh, just a coming back and saying and reaffirming, are these pieces working for us? Is there anything that we might want to shift there? And even with some of the goals, that might also be more of a refresh opportunity rather than a wholesale, starting from scratch. But that will really be informed by what we find in your SWOT analysis. Well, because the past couple of years have been a pretty extraordinary set of years. And so some of the groups that we are working with, there have been pretty significant changes in their communities that might warrant more change. So we really try and focus it on that in terms of what has shifted in your community in the past several years since you last did your planning efforts, and how do we want to respond to that? So I would say it's a pretty good mix of refresh where we can and rework where the needs are calling for it. The one other thing that I'll add is that we will also work with you in this process to understand what is your annual planning process. How will you use this tool on an annual basis to come back to understand what is needed to move forward in terms of implementation in the upcoming fiscal year? So that is something that we'll also discuss, both, how are we building on the past, but how will this plan be able to move forward and be adaptable to meet your needs in the coming years as well.
And then one other question that I asked when we were interviewing y'all, but I think the rest of the board could benefit from hearing, is how, each of our departments also have plans, and sometimes programs within departments have their own strategic plans. So how you do or don't bring that all together, or let those be separate documents.
Yeah, we really want the strategic plan to be that umbrella that holds all of the rest of the planning activities. And so as part of that work, and part of what we've already requested is that initial document input, is understanding where are all of those plans, what is currently in progress, what will be refreshed during the time of the strategic plan, so that we can well align them. So our team's going to be reviewing those plans to make sure that there's no conflict that would be created through the strategic planning process, and then also using the strategic plan as that overarching planning document that then can reference some of those much more specific planning areas.
Great, thank you. Without seeing any other board comments, Steve, do you want to sort of wrap us up?
I want to acknowledge that we don't have to have a strategic plan. There are organizations, public and private organizations, that don't have strategic plans. There's work that's going to happen regardless, right? So it's I just want to sort of acknowledge that. And the point, though, of having a strategic plan in my mind is the extent to which we want to be intentional and focused around the things that are most important to accomplish, starting with the board and then moving throughout the organization. If we don't do that, I guess I think of an analogy of, you know, a rowboat in the middle of the ocean, sort of existing, surviving, paddling and doing some things, but not necessarily, that's not the same thing as a ship that has a destination that's going to encounter storms and challenges along the way, but it's trying to get to a certain place. And there are a number of specific actions it's trying to take to get to that place. So to me, that's the value of a strategic plan, is that it narrows and focuses our efforts on the things that, in this case, this board, the 5 of you, we've talked a lot about, we're going to have this board presumably for the next 2 years at least, right? And so to what extent do we want to come together, and does this board want to say, all right, here's what we want to really focus on, and we've set this out as we will set it out as a 3-year plan. But what are the things that this board wants to see the organization accomplish and drive from your seats as the governing body? The other thing that we've had some conversations about is the Board of Commissioners has never actually had sort of a specific action plan that the board focuses on. The board, in the last 10 years, we've had these organization-wide strategic plans that help guide the whole organization. And obviously the board's work is in alignment with that. We use that plan to drive a lot of things, but I think there's a real opportunity for us through this process to help not only define sort of what is that direction and what are what is the focus and the priorities that we want the organization to have, but also how does the board want to spend its time? What are the things that specifically you want to take on and focus on and lead that are more in your area of the things that you need to focus on versus, you know, other players in the organization. And then to further that, I mean, I would love to see us get even more intentional about how we organize the board's time, right? The Tuesdays, the business meetings that we have, where there's a lot of department business that drives your work on Tuesdays, but then Wednesdays, the work sessions, and we've sort of, you know, are in the practice of a more organic sort of, well, we'll see what issues come up or what assignments the board may drive or things we need to bring forward. It would be really great if we could be even more intentional about setting up how your Tuesdays and Wednesdays go, because you have limited time to drive the work that you want to do. So I just want to say that you know, we've gone through various efforts around strategic planning. My view is always like each effort should build upon the last effort, right? It should get slightly better and slightly more it should become more efficient and more effective for the organization based on, you know, lessons learned from prior processes that we've had. So that was the main thing that I just wanted to call attention to, is that we don't have to do this work. And I really hope that it's not a rote practice, that everyone, the board, our leader, our executive leaders in the organization, the staff, and our community view this as an opportunity to drive action for a short period of time here in the next 2 to 3 years, and see what we can accomplish as a team.
Great. Thank you. Great. If there's nothing else on this item, thank you so much, Colleen and Annie Rose, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the new year in person. And appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Happy holidays.
Just looking to see if there's anything else. Steve, any other administrator items we could bump into this time? Otherwise, we can take a brief recess.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't see anything. Great. Well, then in that case, at the sound of my gavel, we will be in a recess. We have an 11 a.m. time certain with guests from outside. So ask everyone to be back here in the conference room a couple of minutes beforehand to settle in. And with that, I will see you at, let's call it 10:58 back here.
So Steve, I remember 2 quotes.
Welcome back. I will reconvene from recess this regular meeting of the Board of Lane County Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. We are here for item B, 8B on our agenda. This is a work session on mass timber innovation opportunities to address housing affordability and fire resilient forests. We have a number of guests with us today. I will note our county administrator had to step away, so our assistant administrator, Greg Rickoff, is standing in for him. But I believe I will turn this over to our community and economic development manager, Jason Harris, to introduce the item and our guests this morning.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. I'm Jason Harris, Lane County's Community Economic Development Manager, who's hosting a series of policy-level work session topics to inform the board and staff about the various challenges and opportunities impacting our local economy. Last week, the board's work session was focused on the industry and demographic trends, which represent challenges to our region. We learned that our workforce is aging. Lane County is dependent on new residents moving into our region, but the lack of housing supply and high cost of housing is a significant deterrent to retaining the workforce being educated here, as well as the ability to attract new residents. Lastly, we learned that local wages are lower than the state average. In essence, the county needs to increase the housing supply and average wages needed to rise to support prosperity in our region. Assisting local industry upskill their labor force, which in turn will result in higher wages, is one of our best tactics to address the wage issue. Today's work session is focused on the opportunities in timber and wood products industry in Lane County, which represents approximately 6,000 jobs. It's our largest manufacturing sector with an average wage of $66,000 annually. We're going to learn about the innovation in mass timber and local efforts in the forestry and a local nonprofit based in Oak Ridge. With our first presenter is Professor Ian McDonald, Director of Tallwood Design Institute at Oregon State University. And I'm going to pull up the presentation. And Jessica, if you could bring him into the conversation. Appreciate that. Get this pulled to full screen.
Jason, I do not have anyone joining the meeting.
Okay. That is unfortunate. Well, we will advance through his slides. If he's joining later, we'll come back to these. With that, we'll go to our next presenter, which is Professor Judith Shine, Director of the Director of Tallwood's Design Institute and Director of Design in the University of Oregon professor. And with that, I will pull up your presentation.
I could probably present Ian's and he could present mine because we work together very closely. He's the director of the Tallwood Design Institute and his base is at Oregon State University in the College of Forestry. I'm a professor of architecture, and actually I could start with this. This is actually the end of Ian's presentation. I'm at the University of Oregon. Let's start here. So I'm going to be talking about housing. Ian was talking generally about what Tallwood Design Institute does. I know some of you know what the Tallwood Design Institute does, but we thought we'd give an introduction. So we're going to do this a little bit backwards. So the project I'm going to be talking about is one that several of you have seen. Stephen and Mary, and maybe somebody else were at our open house a few weeks ago. If you could go back to the first slide. Yeah, there we go. So it's a workforce housing project that we've been working on for some time. And we have managed to actually get funding for it with a project that Ian was going to talk about, which is the ETA Build Back Better Regional Challenge, which I believe you've all heard about, which was $41.4 million awarded to a group of us, the two universities with Tallwood, and also Port of Portland, which led at Business Oregon, Oregon Department of Forestry, and Department of Land Conservation Development to do a suite of things that really led to supply chain strengthening all along the mass timber supply chain ecosystem. One of the projects it funded was doing prototyping of a small mass plywood house that I've been working on with Assistant Professor Mark Fretz. Next slide. So I think everybody here probably knows what mass timber is. It's kind of a squishy term because engineered wood products have been around for a very long time, including plywood and other things. Basically, engineered wood is just taking very small pieces of wood, chips, strands, as much as lumber and veneer, and fastening them together, mostly with glue, sometimes with nails and dowels, to make big, strong pieces of wood. So we no longer need to cut down really big old growth trees to make very strong, actually much stronger pieces of wood than we could make out of dimensional lumber. But there's been some developments lately. A product called cross-laminated timber was developed in Europe in the mid-90s, which is basically just cross-laminating lumber to make very big, strong panels. And then right here in Lyons, Oregon, Frere's Lumber, now Frere's Engineered Wood, which has been making plywood for years, worked with researchers at Oregon State University, Ari Sinhai and Andre Barbosa, to conceive and develop and pre-certify mass plywood, which just like it sounds is massive plywood. And we had an interest in working with mass plywood in particular because it can be sourced, the veneer can be sourced from trees as small as 5-inch diameter. So it really can make very good use of trees thinned from restoration forest practices, which makes healthier forests. And we've made this argument about there's a virtuous circle of the mass timber ecosystem where those products reducing wildfire risk can go into mass timber products using advanced manufacturing techniques, which we are working on, make engineered wood products which store carbon, make prefabricated building components anywhere from big panels that replace concrete and steel to, as you'll see, panels for even small houses. And then go in, because of prefabrication, these buildings get constructed incredibly efficiently with really minimum waste. And in general have many properties, they store carbon, that make them much healthier. There's biophilic properties that make people feel healthier and happier. And that will create, we think, more market for more sustainable forest management. So next slide. So we chose Frere's partly, well, lots of reasons. It's local, it uses very small diameter forests, but also it comes in very thin panels, meaning that the panels come as thin as 2 inches, and they go up by 1 inch because they're made of 1-inch pallets. Cross-laminated timber, at least right now in this country, starts at 4¼ inches. So we thought if we could use a material where we're taking out about 1/3 of the fiber, we might be able to compete at a small scale with lightwood frame. And the reason we want to do this is what I just talked about in terms of that circle, is that we can create more jobs in urban areas, more market for restoration timber, and generally create healthier buildings. So next slide. So we started looking at a panelized workforce housing system. There's a bunch of ways to look at modular. One is complete volumetric modules that are generally good for stacking up on bigger projects. We decided to go with what's called flat pack, which we'll show you, because you can really transport flat packs of panels pretty much anywhere and at longer distances, and they can be assembled, we think, pretty quickly in the field. Next slide. But we started working back in 2020 with the city of Milwaukee, which was proactively responding to HB 2001 to update their code to allow cottage clusters on sites that were formerly single-family. So we started working with them specifically on that model, designing a small footprint, 2-bedroom, 2-story house that could be a cottage cluster, could be an ADU, and also could be a freestanding house almost anywhere. And next slide. And after many iterations, did I say many? Right, so we finally landed with them on this, where we worked out on this site, we could actually fit something like 11 units clustered around a courtyard, and that really determined footprint size and height. Next slide. Oh, actually, yeah, no, we can stay. Yeah. This is fine, sorry, either one. It's a little over 700 square feet inside, out to out with all the insulation, et cetera. It's a little over 800, which works well for every zoning area. It seems to have its own cottage cluster requirements, but this does fit into most. And as you can see, it's a very simple 2-bedroom, 2-story house with, living and dining and a half bath on the ground floor, lots of storage. And then upstairs, 2 bedrooms. And some of you have been there, and when we had the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce out, she admired our closets more than almost anything else. She said, oh my God, these are bigger than I have here. I know. Better than my Washington condo, anyway.
Pardon my interruption, but the floor plan you're showing here, is that the picture that is shown 3 slides ahead, panelized workforce housing? Is that product right there?
It's the same.
Yeah. This product right
Yes,
here?
yes, it's that one, yeah. And that was a rendering of that site that you saw with the bunch of units on it. Yeah.
Pardon my interruption, thank you.
Yeah, no.
One more interruption, on those 11 houses, how big was that lot?
It's a big single-family lot. You can see, I haven't worked with that lot in over 2 years, and I can't quite remember, but it's not It's probably a double lot. It wasn't a single lot size, which is why we could fit 11 units on it. There was one next door to it that we could fit more like 4 to 6 units on. And one next door to that, we could only fit 4 on. So it really depends on the size of the
It's
lot.
probably like a 160 by 100,
Probably.
double lot size,
Yeah.
not a suburban lot,
Yeah, something like that. I wish I gave you specific
That's fine.
numbers.
I just
but-
wanna know.
Those units are 24 by 16 to give you a good indication.
Yeah, that's right.
And setbacks.
Yeah, and the reason they're 24 by 16 is a Frere's panel comes 48 feet, and we cut it in half. We were trying to do absolutely minimal waste on this, which I think the next slide we'll talk about. Yeah. So what we found is that we could use 3-inch MPP for the outer walls, floor, and roof, and that we could use 2-inch MPP for interior partitions. So we tried to be absolutely as efficient as possible in terms of cutting up the panels and trying not to waste anything. And next slide. And then we worked with an engineering team to figure out how we're all going to put it together. Originally, we thought we would actually ship the panels with insulation and cladding, which necessitated all the attachments sealed on the inside. We've since decided that it's too much labor, too much hand labor, and we also believe that, you're risking getting the insulation cladding damaged in shipping. So we're just going with flat pack. Typically in modular, insulation and cladding is added in the field anyway. So we're going with that. We're going through an optimization process with our engineers right now, and we just took out almost all the steel connections, taking about 15,000 out of the materials. We're extremely excited about that. And we're also going vertical with the panels instead of horizontal, and we've actually managed to eliminate one whole panel. So you can see we're working always to try to see how we can drive the price down as much as possible. Next slide. If you could click on that arrow. We have this machine. It's a PSA CNC in the lab. You can see it right that corner. These are what we have. We also have a big press and a robot in that cage. These are our research faculty, not actually construction professionals, who you can see are working both digitally and analog with drawings to figure out how to build this thing. The first time we decided we're not hiring a contractor. After optimization, we're sending the drawings out for a contractor to take over the whole thing from file fabrication. Many of them have a bigger BSA than we have, and construction. And that will be built out in the yard at Emerson, so we can actually test thermal and acoustic and other kinds of efficiencies. Next slide. This is the fun one coming up. So this is the project going up. Didn't go up this fast. It's a 30-second video.
Oh.
It took a little longer than that, right? But you get the idea. And again, we're trying to simplify the number of pieces. There should be a little more of it. There it goes. Because, it's until the roof goes on, right? And there's just a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. And I think maybe even the skylights go in. Yeah, there they are. Okay, there's everybody running around the lab making this thing happen. So I think the next slides, this shows you, we didn't put the insulation and cladding on in the shop. We're going to do that outside to be able to do more testing. We'll probably be doing structural testing here because we're waiting until we do the second round of engineering, and then we're going to talk to the state building officials about what testing they think we'll need for local jurisdictions, because right now, 3-inch mass timber walls are not in the code. You can do 4-inch, but not 3. But if you can save that much fiber, that's what we're going for. So next slide. So some of you have been there. This is ground floor. We went through the IKEA catalog and ordered a whole bunch of furniture, which we got assembled just before the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce arrived. Literally making one of the beds. And by making, I mean putting it together. Right? So you can see when you enter, there's a coat closet and bike storage on the right and a half bath, and then dining and living space here. And then you go upstairs, next slide, and that's one of our giant linen closet, which is on a cantilevered piece of flooring. It came about because Mark Fretz, my colleague's wife, stuck her head in a Zoom and said, "Where's the linen closet?" And it was like, I was like, I know where it's going to go. It's going to be cantilevered. Anyway, architects love cantilevering. It was like very exciting because the MPP is really good at doing that. And then we have closets in the bedrooms. Upstairs, we tried to take advantage of the gable and keep all the closets and things at door height so that you could then have some space above them to have light come through and make the room seem bigger, which we think they did. And some of you have been there and are nodding, yes, they did seem bigger. Fantastic. They think that's either the end, or I have 2 slides of the bathrooms coming up. Let's find out. Yeah, right. So these are the half bath and the full bath upstairs. We have a bunch of polycarb, both translucent, well, clear, which we used here, and for separating interior rooms. But we also created, really Mark and Jason Stenson created what we call these energy shutters, so that instead of using triple pane aluminum frame windows, which are expensive, created these sliding shutters out of insulated polycarb that can serve both as kind of privacy curtains and still let light, but also serve as a third pane. And they did a mock-up a while ago doing, smoke infiltration testing. And because the precision of the cutting of the panels is so tight, the windows just popped in. I mean, and all of the windows and skylights went in less than a day. And we think once we test it outside, it's going to be extremely thermally efficient. So I think that's the last slide. No, right. This is a project which would require another talk, but we've been also working on a retrofit project using very similar technology, MPP panels, insulation, and cladding, to do kind of external retrofit for both thermal and seismic retrofits of 2- and 3-story multifamily light wood frame housing, many of which are desperately in need of both kinds of retrofits. And we did a 1-story mock-up and a 2-story structural test, and we're putting out an RFP for a contractor to build a 3-story one to do some more structural testing. So, and we have a pilot project for the house out in Burns, which we're excited about. We hope to have some here in Lane County. Just trying to put that out.
Can we give you some land?
I think there is some land in various places. We've been talking to people, and but we don't have a pilot project yet for the retrofit. That we're talking to several contractors who work with USDA RD developments and do retrofits of those and are interested. So we're hoping.
Jason, I'm told that Ian has joined now, and if you want to go back and do that
So even
portion.
the introduction, that should come before what I said.
Well, we'll start back. Professor McDonald?
Oh, you don't need to call me Professor. Ian is fine, thanks. And I apologize. I live half my life on Zoom, and then I always chooses the best moments not to work for me. So sorry to be joining late.
Great. Well, we have your presentation queued up. Just let me know as you would like me to advance the slides.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Well, thanks for having us here today. I was supposed to speak before Judith and give you the preamble on TDI. So anyway, here goes. So please, next slide, if you could. A little bit about the Tallwood Design Institute. For those who are not familiar, we're established in 2015 formally. We kind of took our name, I think, early in 2017. And we're funded through the statewide programs in the HEC. We have our kind of core funding covered off by the state, and then we secure various other grants to conduct applied R&D and education work. And really the kind of main thing is that it's a strong partnership between the beavers and the ducks, which I know is a little bit of a weird thing for Oregonians, but I didn't realize how much of a weird thing that would be when I came down from British Columbia a few years ago. But I think it's been a real testament that to both universities have been able to work together on strong interdisciplinary research, really trying to get out of the silos and work across the disciplines of architecture, engineering, forestry, and wood science, and with a strong, focus on expanding the manufacturing base for Oregon, helping to revitalize the forest industry and add this new dimension of mass timber, which Judith, I think, has already talked about. So that's why we're here. Next slide, please. A shot of one of each campus, and then on the lower left, that's the PV Forest Sciences Center on the OSU campus. That's the kind of home base for the College of Forestry nowadays, and it's a really inspiring mass timber building. If you haven't had the chance to come and see it, it's really meant to be us putting our money where our mouth is, I guess, and showcasing the potential of this new material to really unite different aspects of forestry and wood technology. And on the lower right is our Emerson Advanced Wood Products Lab going up. under construction a few years ago. It was completed in 2019. And it's the first commercial use of a material that Judith was talking about called the mass ply panel. So you can see that those panels on the outside of the building. And those are actually about 42 feet wide by 12 feet high and 3 inches thick. And they go together very, very rapidly. Really efficient construction system. And it's great to be the first commercial application of that, very appropriate for the kind of work we do in the building. Next slide, please. So we really do have these pillars around interdisciplinary applied research. We do product and development and testing. So we worked with Frera's Engineered Wood on their mass ply panel product, helping to kind of iron out the engineering properties that were required and the specifications prior to them getting commercial certification for that product. And then they went away and have invested about $40 million of their own money, maybe more than that now, in this 4-acre greenfield manufacturing site in Lyons. And we also do a variety of training and education and outreach. And increasingly, we're contributing to regional economic development strategies in partnership with folks like Oregon Department of Forestry and others. Next slide, please. So some facilities there, really, we have advanced fabrication capabilities. We're able to kind of simulate, build our own mass timber products and then test them. And the reason that we would do that, for example, would be if we wanted to look at using a lesser utilized species, not Douglas fir, but something that's prevalent in Oregon, but not utilized, especially if we can use a material like, say, ponderosa pine, which is in abundance in Eastern Oregon, is something that you would pull out of forests through restoration thinning activities to try to reduce wildfire risk. But there's not really much commercial potential for that material in mass timber right now. So that's some of the kind of work we do in the building. Next slide, please. We have a variety of faculty across the 2 universities and several departments working, as well as a core team of about 10 people. And really, we're one of the earliest institutes to really focus on mass timber. I think the earliest work was done back in about 2010, which was several years before the first manufacturing facility in the US opened in 2015. So the message we want to convey is that Oregon is really leading the charge on this stuff. We have the most innovative building codes. We were the early adopters of mass timber buildings. There were buildings in this state and in Washington before most of the other states. Our architecture, engineering, and construction firms have really jumped in and become innovators and early adopters of this technology. And our research infrastructure, I'd say, is second to none in terms of this new method of building. Next slide, please. A little bit about the mass timber sector. We say that it's growing at approximately 25% a year. It really is rapid. There were, the first mass timber building using cross-laminated timber in the US was built in 2011 in Montana. There were, a dozen projects until just a few years later. And today there are approaching, I think now around 2,500 projects nationally in all 50 states. So the West Coast has really been leading the charge. The rest of the country is catching up. Canada is also very strong in this, but as I say, Oregon is the early adopter and innovator. Next slide, please. Something around, now we have panel manufacturing, cross-laminated timber manufacturing. The first facility was in Oregon in 2015 in Riddle. We now have, in addition to Oregon, we have manufacturing in Washington and all the other states you see on the list there, of varying sizes, some quite small plants, some significant capacity. And then in Oregon, of note, I think you'll all be aware of the Roseboro investment in their Lamstock facility, just recently announced for Springfield, over $100 million investment. Timber Lab putting a factory into Millersburg, and they're about to have a groundbreaking ceremony in February. And that's going to be an advanced facility with significant new technology involved. doing some things that no North American manufacturers have done to date, and very able to compete with European counterparts. And then in the Clackamas-Estacada region, there's kind of an emerging cluster happening there with several factories locating close to each other that are synergistic. And then a little bit further off, and still in the due diligence stages, but Timber HP looking at a major wood fiber insulation factory in White City down in the southern Oregon. They were the first, they currently have a factory operating in Maine, and that's the first facility in the US to take wood biomass, basically wood fiber, and make insulation materials from it. The really cool thing is in addition to being light years more sustainable than, say, fiberglass based products, it's actually cheaper. So it's going to be, you know, the adoption curve, I think, will be really fast on this one. Next slide, please. You may have been to the new airport. This is just kind of indicative of, you know, the importance of mass timber to the state, and a really great success story. And I don't have time to go into depth on this, but the sustainability story, the storytelling, the efforts to track and trace where the wood comes from, the efforts to source from family-owned forests and tribal nations, and tell that story of how, you know, Oregon is a leader in sustainable forestry, has been really, really great and really inspiring, and is serving as a model for other buildings that are currently in design. Next slide, please. Wanted to mention some of the barriers and challenges that we are working on in combination with other entities. You know, you can read the list, but, you know, we're working hard on making people more familiar with mass timber through various outreach and education activities. There's a perceived higher cost. Some of that's because the industry is new and hasn't developed economies of scale. But additionally, you know, there's kind of a fear factor when you're trying something new. If you're you know, a construction firm's never built with the technology before, it's really a question of maybe hedging against any uncertainties. And so as more firms get experienced, we're starting to see those kind of contingencies and those additional costs being whittled away, so that we're finding that in many cases, mass timber can pencil quite well against concrete and steel. We're continue to doing work to investigate aspects of fire and seismic resilience and durability and acoustics. And UO and OSU are both building new lab facilities that will be able to test acoustics and fire aspects. There's workforce development issues or challenges, I would say, in terms of new skills in digital design and fabrication. You know, we're not dealing with commodities here. We're dealing with products that go in a specific place in a specific building. And you need things like people who are very skilled in 3D computer-aided design. That's really great because it's a job that appeals to young people, and it's highly portable, can be done from anywhere. So there's great opportunities to maybe get young people engaged in this wherever you know, they can do it. And one of the things we're challenged by is that Europe has been doing this longer than we have, you know, since about the mid-90s, and has developed these large firms with significant production capacity. They're able to access much lower fiber cost, and they're able to, and they know the business better, and they're able to kind of price into the US very, very aggressively. And typically right now, you know, a European firm bidding on a mass timber project is able to undercut a domestic one by 10 to 15%. Next slide, please. Just talking briefly, you know, about this collaboration beyond just the two universities, kind of spurred on by the Labor Day fires of 2020, I'm sorry. Our two universities were brought together with the Port of Portland, ODF, Business Oregon, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and to, you know, investigate what could be done around kind of these intertwined themes. And next slide, please. Of, you know, how do we create new jobs in the mass timber supply chain, reducing carbon benefit emissions of buildings? How can we channel these mass timber products to, tackle the housing affordability and supply crisis that we have in our state and indeed all down the West Coast. How can we bring fiber into the supply chain, reducing wildfire risk and improving forest health? And if we can do all these things together, there's these synergistic kind of co-benefits. So that was kind of the crux of what the Oregon Mass Timber Coalition, which has been working since 2020, has been seeking to do. And in 2022, we secured just over $40 million in federal funding through the EDA Build Back Better Regional Challenge Program. Next slide, please. That's the announcement, and you can go on to the next slide. I'm sorry, I didn't know if that would. So is there Judith, is there a slide in here on the projects themselves, or did we skip that?
We skipped it.
All right. All right, so let me just say that we're working with the partners mentioned in the previous slides on these 9 synergistic projects, including the one that Judith just described to you around the prototyping of the mass plywood panel house, some complementary testing and R&D at OSU. We're building lab infrastructure, an acoustic lab at University of Oregon, a fire testing lab at OSU. The Port of Portland is developing a mass timber housing innovation campus. You can see a rendering of that in the third picture down there on the right. And that's going to be really exciting, trying to be a nexus within Portland itself for this kind of innovations in housing, trying to bring mass timber and the benefits of mass timber into the housing domain and work with modular producers. And then ODF, Marcus will probably talk about that one later. Marcus, can you give me a thumbs up? Or yeah, great, thank you. So we can, what we've done, having got the Build Back Better funding in 2022, as I say, we're working on these projects. In 2023, we were invited to apply for something called the Tech Hubs designation. That's a Department of Commerce EDA program. And really what they were trying to do there was identify promising industry clusters around the country that would have the potential within 10 years to be globally competitive within their industry and region. And we applied, we were designated as one of 31 tech hubs in October of 2023. And it gives us preferred access to certain grants through the Department of Commerce and others. With that designation, what we decided to do was partner into Washington State, because the two states have really been walking kind of shoulder to shoulder over the last few years. I would say over the last 9-10 years in terms of their adoption of mass timber. And together, the two states have about half of their production capacity in the country. And so it made sense for us to partner as a wider region on this tech hub. And we have submitted various grants, workforce development grants to the Good Jobs Challenge, a kind of capacity building and innovation grant to the Build to Scale program. We're waiting to hear back from both of those. And, it's a great development to be part of. Apart from anything else, we have 86 organizations that signed on to various commitments within the Tech Hub across the two states. And, that more than anything else, that kind of momentum is really worth something. Next slide, please. That's some of the organizations in the Tech Hub. I mentioned there's 86 discrete organizations that signaled their willingness to be part of this hub. And we applied also for a large $50 million grant from the Tech Hub program last February, or this February, I should say. We were unsuccessful at that, but EDA decided that for they made 12 awards, and for the 19 of the 31 hubs that were not awarded the large funds, they just made $500,000 catalytic awards to those hubs so that we can continue to kind of build and plan together. And so we're preparing to carry out some market studies with that. We're preparing to develop a formal governance strategy, also work on some policy alignment and some capital access, trying to bring more investment into the sector, as well as, some convening and communications activities. And really the core mission, this is my last slide, is that, the Pacific Northwest firms have achieved this first mover advantage with mass timber within this country. And we have this rapidly expanding construction market. We're just scratching the surface. If you consider 2,500 buildings as a percentage of how many buildings are constructed every year in the US, it's a tiny fraction. So there's opportunity for significant growth. But these European firms, as I said, are kind of like eating our lunch right now. They're able to land product into the market, even with shipping costs included, at a 10 to 15% price advantage. And so we're trying to address some systemic barriers that will eliminate this differential and actually boost our innovation competitiveness such that within 10 years, our goal is that we will be the globally competitive region of choice. Thank you.
Actually, Ian, there were two more slides, but the NSF engine, I'll just say one thing about, which is that we got a development award for an NSF engine, which is meant to be really an economic workforce engine fueled by R&D technology conducted by the universities in very close association with industry, use applied. And we had some support. We got a letter of support from thank you, Steve, for the development award. And we are now, we applied for the full engine. We did a preliminary proposal. We were one of, I don't know, like hundreds that applied. 71 were selected to submit full proposals. We're one of that group, and we're frantically working on that now and hope to be able to get a letter of support commitment, something from the county, maybe just quantifying how many hours staff might put into it to work with us on our various projects. But it would be incredibly helpful to have some support from the county on that. And that's being led by the UFO, but with OSU.
Well, thank you, Judith and Ian. Our next presenter is Marcus Kaufman, Oregon Department of Forestry, to speak about forest management and the partnerships thereof. Marcus?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I'm Marcus Kaufman with the Oregon Department of Forestry. I'm just going to kind of abbreviate this even further for the sake of time. So if we could advance to slide 7. I'll just kind of jump right in. There's a map on slide 7, so we'll know when we get there.
We're there.
So the real question I'm just going to talk about briefly is how do we increase the wood fiber into mass timber and improve forest health so that we're addressing the wildfire problem? How do we do that in a state where 60% of the forest resources are managed by the federal government? And our answer to that is essentially a partnership approach between state forests and our federal forest partners. So we run that through the Federal Forest Restoration Program, which is actually a program that former Governor Kitzhaber started about 10 years ago with the recognition that the status quo was not serving anyone. So what you see is a number of our partnerships. We're working through this program on 11 different national forests and a couple of BLM districts. And really what we do is we bring the state's workforce to bear in partnership with our federal partners. And we do this in a way that we augment the number of acres treated and augment the amount of material produced. So this is an ongoing program that we have, and we essentially took some of the EDA funding that was provided through the $41.4 million Build Back Better program and used it to pay our colleagues. And we have a very thriving partnership on the Willamette National Forest. We started some work on the Detroit Ranger District in places that were affected by the Beachy Lion's Head fire. And that's already resulted in a couple of projects, one which was 7 million board feet that we put onto the open market, and that was purchased by Ferrez Mass Timber. Our next project that we're working on is actually up the Mackenzie River District, and what we're doing there is assisting with the planning and analysis to do a large-scale fuels reduction project around a road system. So, we add value through the planning and then also through implementation using the Good Neighbor Authority. So if you can go to the next slide. So this is just some text to kind of put it into everyone's mind of like how we do this. We use the existing tools, and our purpose is to really demonstrate to the broader industry and to our partners that federal forests can be a reasonable amount of supply. They're not heavily managed, and as most folks know, they're subject to large wildfires. So the other place that we're helping to kind of broaden the envelope is around the track and trace. So Ian spoke to the Portland Airport project, and one of the things that really resonated with people there is knowing where the wood comes from. And we've taken that same approach and partnered with Sustainable Northwest, partnered with University of Oregon to essentially do track and trace. And what that looks like is social and ecological monitoring. Let's go to the next slide. So that monitoring is really about expanding social license and providing the evidence base that this work is important and gets the kinds of results that we want to see. And hopefully that decreases the amount of litigation into the future. And then lastly, we want this work to really be catalytic, right? We want to go beyond these small projects that we've started with. And the reason I wasn't able to join when this conversation started today was that I was in a conversation with the state forester about using 20-year long-term agreements with our federal partners to really stabilize wood fiber supply and increase resilience on the landscape. And this is kind of the direction that we want to be going in on federal lands, is using these tools, using the partnership ability, the implementation ability of the state to push our federal partners to make longer term commitments that really address the fiber supply question for a growing industry. And we think that the ecological monitoring and kind of track and trace is a really important part of that. So we can bring the public along with us to help them understand that those two goals of fiber supply and resilience are not in opposition, but they're in concert. So I know that there's short on time, so I'll leave it there and pass it to the next speaker and take any of your questions. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Marcus. And with that, we're going to transition to Sarah Altimus Pope with Southern Willamette Forest Collaborative to learn of local initiatives here in the Oak Ridge region, touching upon some of the items presented today.
Yeah, and I think I can build off of some of the work that Marcus talked about. We've been working closely with ODF ourselves. So I am the executive director of South Willamette Solutions, an Oak Ridge-based nonprofit which oversees the Southern Willamette Forest Collaborative and Oak Ridge Air. And actually, if we have the video on there, I didn't know if we were going to keep that or not. I think it's a good overview. And what I like about this, I have about 90 seconds of this video. It shows you a flyover of the Oak Ridge area and a good demonstration of how these communities really are in the forest. And then I can hit on some of the things that we'll talk about in here in the next slides. Let's see how it goes.
We're going to try this, and it's going to pop up.
Industry to get together and talk about what their interests are and what's important to them in the projects that need to be done on forests. All the communities in the Upper Willamette watershed are considered wildland-urban interface. We live at the foothills of the Cascades. We're completely surrounded by forest lands, and so we do have quite a risk of fires. And after the 2020 Labor Day fires, we know that we have got to learn how to live with fire and to make our communities more resilient and harden them against the risk of wildfire.
The goal of this project is to thin the forest down to, set prescriptions. And by thinning out the forest, you're reducing the amount of fuel reducing the connectivity of the fuel and making it less likely that the fire is going to get up into the canopies of the trees and placing fire.
The scale of thinning and field work that we have to do on the Middle Fork and on the Willamette it's a big project. You know, and once we thin those areas, we also need to go back to some of those areas and treat the fuels either by prescribed burning or pile burning or other methods.
The collaborative has been at the side with the Forest Service and ODF through implementing these projects and selecting the priority restoration work that the Forest Service can then invest in after projects are done.
One of the things this project has done is really bring in the city of Oak Ridge in some tangible ways. We've been able to work with the collaborative and the state to provide dry firewood. And so one of the issues that we have where Oak Ridge and West Farrar is that it can get very smoky.
So that's probably a good place to end that. We'll talk a little bit about the Community Firewood Program. As an umbrella, so the Forest Collaborative, we really focus on collaborating with all the partners that I mentioned at ODF, county, state, other state agencies, as well as organizations, community members. And working on these collaborative restoration projects. So the Rigdon Collaborative Restoration Project is one we started in 2016 that's still ongoing, and I'll talk a little bit about East Oak Ridge. We also, since 2020, have engaged in wildfire resilience work, doing thinning on private lands. The Oak Ridge Air Project, we work closely with Lane Regional Air Protection Agency to implement home heating upgrades and do smoke mitigation year-round. And climate resilience, in the last couple of years, we've been working to fund the Willamette Activity Center, which you probably have heard is part of the Lane County Grant for Resilience Hub. And we've fundraised $6.7 million so far on that. And then we have a Department of Energy renewable energy project looking at renewable energy opportunities for East Lane County. A lot of this work we do through the field tours, learning sessions, and roundtable discussions to come to agreement on the types of projects we work on. So I want to talk to you about, this forest health and risk to communities. This is a picture of the Cedar Creek fire in 2022 that evacuated Oak Ridge, and we're seeing this increase in mega fires, an increased risk of fire with longer, hotter, drier seasons, and this is leading to a changed forest condition. Let's go to the next slide. I wanted to share this with you, and this is a map of fires in East Lane County in the last, since the 50s. The really light colored are the 50s, and you see as we get to the darker orange, the brightest being the fires of this year. But really since 2020, we're seeing these mega fires on the landscape, and that's really changing this forest condition, and it's also impacting the work the Forest Service can do. A fire outside of Lowell, the Gales fire in 2021, the Forest Service had planned 50 million board feet that was all laid out and ready for sale that was burned over in that fire. And not only are fires going through previously planned areas, it's also changing that planning cycle for the Forest Service, because when they have fires, they have to address the fire suppression, and then there's years of fire recovery afterwards. Next slide. So one of the things that we have, since the Cedar Creek fire, have worked with the Forest Service to do is pivoting and looking at where can projects be planned that are going to have the most bang for their buck, and especially knowing this compressed timeline and increase in fires. So this East Oak Ridge strategy is a planning area. The hash red is private lands, and the three different colors are three different environmental assessments. This project will create a buffer. So east of this project is all Cedar Creek fire. Create a buffer between Cedar Creek, which now will have an increased fire risk in about 5 years, and the city of Oak Ridge. It'll create 50 million board feet and put in shaded field break control lines and create a ton of biomass in addition to that. And so we know that a lot of that saw timber is going to make it to market down here in this valley, but a lot of that biomass gets left in place. So we have several different initiatives to look at how to utilize that. I wanted to really quickly show you a map of the work we're doing as the Forest Collaborative in the communities. So the dark blue are projects funded through mostly Oregon Department of Forestry, but also some from DEQ and Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office to do private lands fuels reduction. Now that also does create material, but at this point it's such small material we haven't figured out ways to monetize that. So that mostly gets chipped on site, and a little bit of it makes it to our community fire program. So this is an example of one of the successes utilizing biomass. So those pictures you see on the right, those are, the top is trees that were removed during fire suppression, and this is the tops of trees. So those normally get left out in the woods and even burned because they don't have enough value to pay the haul costs all the way down here to the valley to get utilized. And a lot of our mills aren't set up to use them. So that's where opportunities like mass timber and new technologies to use a smaller diameter stuff really could turn this into jobs. In the interim, we have been turning it into jobs with a community firewood program. So this program is initially funded with our Oak Ridge Air Grant to get dry firewood to the community to mitigate our smoke impacts. But we successfully, a couple years ago, transitioned it over to a private company, Brock's Woodlot, that is doing the community firewood program piece, but also now doing bundled firewood. And he sells to campgrounds, Lane County campgrounds, and that's a growing business. And using that diversity of markets, pulling from regular timber sales, the top wood from that, fire suppression efforts, and fire mitigation efforts. There's lots of different sources of that biomass. And I think, yeah, so this is just some of our partners. That is at our annual Wildfire Safety Night and now Disaster Expo. And the right is some of the agencies we've been working with and are funded by, and on the left is some of our different community partners that work with us on that work. But I will, just for time's sake, probably stop it there so we have time for questions.
Yes, we'll close us out here. Stop that. And then, well, really the question now of opportunity for question and answer to the board and our presenters is available.
Great,
Chair,
thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you to all the many presenters. Really, really great information and great to have so many good visuals on it. And to the board, I see Commissioner Farr is ready to jump right in.
Thank you, Chair. You're here, so I'm going to talk to you, Judith.
Okay.
It's okay if I call you Judith?
No.
All right. And I see Sierra Pacific is in the room with us too, keeping a keen eye on the discussion that we're having today. Two things that I'm going to mention that you said, and we don't have a lot of time, so there's no way to elaborate on this around the table today, but let's use this as a seed. You asked for support from the county. You specifically asked toward the end of your presentation support from the county in getting grants, etc. And I need to hear more detail on that, but and I think we can subsequently. But the utilization of the efficient and effective and sustainable building materials and building practices, it behooves us all to support you because it's kind of the culmination of our dream, isn't it? To use 5-inch timbers, 5-inch what otherwise would have been cold ponderosa pine, and make front doors. We're looking for more front doors and the jobs associated with creating more front doors. So you've got my support. Let's find ways for the county to support you in any way that we can because it really checks a lot of our boxes.
Fantastic.
And the second is a little bit more difficult to address. 3-inch is currently doesn't meet building codes. 4-inch does. So building codes need to be adjusted in order to not have to adjust the entire industry to create 4-inch. Now that can be some of the most difficult things that we do is adjusting building codes and land use, for instance. Some of the things that really dead end us the quickest are building codes and land use. So however we can help in that, and maybe you have just a brief on how we can help there, but really how do we get to the point where the products are usable? Because today without them meeting building codes, they're not usable.
You can't use them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, briefly, in terms of the zoning, the DLCD, as part of the EDA grant, had a project working with 10 communities to implement, but they've developed a model code because a lot of communities have zoning that don't allow modular housing, which they view as manufactured, and that's really for volumetric, that things get inspected in the factory and put in the field. So they've worked with 10 communities, there's more that are interested, they have a code that can be adopted, which is great. That's a zoning issue. The work we're doing on the panelized doesn't have the same zoning restrictions because it's basically field built. But the issue about the 3-inch thing, it's in a way it's easier in Oregon than a lot of other states because here the state building authority can actually supersede local ones if there's a compelling economic interest, which is how we really got the industry going here. But in general, we haven't really found much opposition. I mean, in general in Oregon, people are very enthusiastic, but it's a long, so we can probably do it faster in Oregon, but we will need, what we're doing now is getting the performance data from engineers that we need to take to building departments, so those engineering counts don't have to be done in every project. So that's one thing, but the other thing is just a continuing advocacy process. A lot of people in Oregon were involved in changing the International Building Code 2021 to allow taller buildings. It's an ongoing effort, and usually it takes several years to adopt those things, but the first state to adopt those codes was Oregon in January 2019, followed by Washington and then California. So advocacy and getting building officials involved in advocacy in the IBC code will make a difference, but also advocacy with local building officials to accept these standards and with the state to encourage local officials to accept the standards would be great.
And in the interest of everybody's time, I'll say that is encouraging. I'd love to hear more, because I'm looking at this lot that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 units on it on a standard residential lot.
I think it was a double. Yeah.
Or a double residential lot. But how do we make it so the local building codes allow that? And you don't need to elaborate on that right now, but that is some of the most difficult work that we do as a Board of Commissioners, is how do we, in the area that we have a jurisdiction over, make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Seneca.
Yes, I have a lot of questions, but this one will be quick. So you mentioned state, county, federal collaboration. One thing I think the Lane County has struggled with a little bit is working with our local stakeholders. Is there any talk of that? I mean, I heard Freres. Is that how you say it?
Freres.
Freres. And Roseboro, but that was it. I think we have representation in here of somebody else that would probably be interested.
You mean in terms of other manufacturers? Or?
Yeah, or timber industry, I mean, in general.
So AFRC does participate in our collaborative, and SPI has been members since when they were Seneca. Roseboro was, but they had a retirement, so we haven't replaced them. But we do have some of those smaller operators that at least know about the planning efforts that are happening and collaborating on these projects and zones of agreement, but not down to the point of new technologies like that. We're not quite in that space.
Well, yeah, I saw the 86 discrete partners. I didn't know if that was something along those lines.
We're also working with, Timber Lab, which is opening a big new facility in Millersburg in the Willamette Valley, and several producers up in Washington. Mercer, which took over from Katerra, and Vaughan Lumbers. But one of the things we've recognized is that there's a need for more manufacturers at both the small local scale, and the larger scale, if we're really going to, strengthen the supply chain and have more buildings.
I think it's important to note too, I just got out of an all-day timber meeting last Friday in Salem, and it's important to note that over 1.9 million acres were burned this year on federal lands, which is about 20% of the log supply, which is a huge amount. In the last 4 years, we've lost more trees to disease than we've logged in 40 years. So those are two statistics that stuck out with me in the meeting that we need to understand. Also, the partnership with the ODF and how we're going to manage the forest is an important factor too. They're still trying to figure out what the federal, million board feet we're going to harvest it. We're down, down to 176 last I heard from 234. We're basically killing our jobs and defunding the ODF to even fight forest fires. As you've seen just recently, the Oregon now is stuck with a bill of almost $300 million of firefighting expenses that they have to come up with somehow. So managing the forest, yes, I'm all for it. And it's what we grow here. We don't grow turnips, we grow timber. And that's what we need to figure out how to make that happen and to do all this building is I'm 100% behind it. So whatever I can do, let me know.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for the presentation. Really fascinating. It's good to see you again, Judith. Enjoyed coming to one of your design workshops, and this is very exciting. And I think you heard, particularly, Commissioner Farr kicking it off. I think we are all interested in hearing concrete, specific ways that we might be able to help. I know you all are working with staff all the time and in far more regular conversations. So I'm looking particularly to our policy director and to Jason for opportunity to come back before us if there's something specific we can do or letters of support we can sign on to for the bigger policy changes.
That'd be great, and we'll be in touch probably through Steve to answer all your questions, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to our online presenters. Good to have you with
Dr.
us.
McDonald, Professor McDonald, thank you.
And so with that, we don't need to do county administration announcements. Steve took care of those earlier, so that concludes our business for the morning. At the sound of my gavel, we will be recessed for lunch, and we will meet back for a 1:30 time certain. Couple of public hearings back down in Harris Hall. With that, we are recessed.